was a seeded tennis professional, or a professional football player, but as you can see, I missed the mark. So that is for when I return to earth again. But I work in investment banking, of which profits is the greatest motivator. And usually in investment banking, you ruthlessly chase profits. The money has to come back. The money needs to make XX, that is, it has to make twice the value of what is invested. But you see, I believe also that profits is necessary, because if we pursue profits in society, some of the issues we deal with, like lack or absence of fuel, efficiency will be taken care of, and we may not be in those or that situation. But having said that, I'm also very interested in poverty, in suffering, in squalor, and trying to understand the inequalities that exist in our societies and why people tend to suffer. Many frameworks and ideas have been used and notions to try and understand really what is going on in our society and how do we understand and address these issues. I mean, you hear of class struggle by the Marxists. Chairman Mao had his interesting discourse on contradictions, just to understand the different levels and the way society rubs up against each other, and those who have and those who don't have. I mean, there are other things like patrimony, neo-patrimony, feudal systems that are used to try and understand the nature of the social arrangements within society. Today I'm going to speak about one that is less often discussed. It's out there, but it's an integral part of our society, especially in developing societies. It is known as structural violence. It was propounded by a gentleman called Johann Galtung in 1969 in his seminal work titled Structural Violence, Peace, Violence and Peace Research. He propounded the idea of structural violence being a type of social arrangement that tends to put people, by virtue of their class, their tribe, their religion, or some other grouping, at a disadvantage. In fact, it puts them in harm's way directly. By virtue of the type of arrangements within society, it is embedded either in policy or in laws or in different aspects of relational dynamics of society, that these people naturally will fall, or these people will be accosted by violence, and more often than not result to a large number of deaths in that society. What strikes me at first is that it is usually embedded in the arrangements in society. That's one. Secondly, it is usually invisible. You may not be able to assign easily culpability. You may not be able to say exactly who is responsible for violence meted out to people or these groups of people in society. A typical case would be where a child dies of malnutrition or a preventable disease. Would you now say that the doctor is responsible, or the fact that his mother doesn't have a job, or his father is unemployed? How do you assign responsibility? You see that it's by virtue of how society is structured that violence is now meted out to this child because of the disadvantage the child has found himself. There are other areas. I'll tell you a short story. I was robbed in 2010. The gentleman of the night took my car. I was returning from trying to learn how to play tennis. My car, my passports, and certain things. And the policemen came usually 25 minutes after or 30 minutes after the event. And the guy just said to me, "Oga, no money for recharge card, so that I will radio them, So I had to look for 500 naira. I had just been robbed. I had to look for 500 naira. And the minute I gave him 500 naira, he didn't buy the recharge card, he made the call. So he just wanted to ensure that, similar stories exist from Nigerians. Or I mean, there are other situations, where, for instance, like the fantastic talk about how to prevent maternal death, you see the fact that ignorance and the fact that people are not educated or informed, who do you begin to hold responsible? In many areas of our lives in developing countries, we face increasingly the menacing effects of structural violence. I mean, there's a damning statistics. Of the 2 billion people that live in developing countries, 25% of them, 25% of their children will not get to their 5th birthday. They die before them. Of those 25%, 10% of those only have probably had vaccines. And a number of them, a good number also die of preventable diseases. I mean, the doctors can speak about that more eloquently. These vaccines, they are about £3 or $5 each at max. Why is our society wired in such a way? And what is our role as citizens? A closely related concept is that of what you call cultural violence. Galton again propounded the issue of cultural violence when he says that by virtue of the divisions in society, we tend to say certain things that happen to certain people, groupings, we tend to justify it based on the fact that they are different. And we'll say, oh well, they were the aggressors in the Civil War, so who cares? Say, oh well, they are of the other religion. If they were of my religion, this wouldn't happen to them. And we see cases in Africa where they've even been described as what? Cockroaches. In history is replete with examples of the furnaces of Dachau and Treblinka, where the simple idea is that people are different, so we must come up with final solutions to take care of them. Cultural violence what it simply does is to justify the existence of structural violence. We say they were not educated, so they should suffer. Who said they shouldn't go to school? While my father was earning a living, where was his dad? So sometimes we must be careful of how we go about thinking these things. Well, why I'm speaking to us about this topic is because as citizens, or as we occupy the office of the citizens, it behoves on us, as we engage our government, as we increasingly understand the role that citizen plays in society, that we tell our governments, as we engage with them, we say, listen, we have to make laws and come up with policies that will take care of the most vulnerable in our societies. It is necessary, it's expedient, that if we do not have peace, if you think you have, then those who do not have will not give you peace. It is important that for our collective existence, that we pay attention and emphasize the need that social safety nets and social policies. Like I've said, my leanings are towards free markets. I believe in profits. But I also believe that we have a responsibility to every and each member of our society. An example will be to study a report that was released in 1942, chaired by a gentleman by the name William Belvidge. It's usually known as the Belvidge Report in England. The Belvidge Report identified, I sat down and looked at society. I said, okay, society was growing. There was good GDP growth, something we're all familiar with. But there were those people, the inequality and incomes, the disparity between inequality and income were becoming unbearable. And certain people were suffering, even though people were coming out of poverty and people were, the rich were getting richer. He now presented this report in 1942, which proposed that there are certain evils that society must take care of at all costs. Squalor, ignorance, idleness, joblessness, disease, and poverty. As we engage with our society, as we speak to our lawmakers and our friends and those in government, please remind them that we must, in our laws, and our policies, create systems that can take care of the most vulnerable amongst us. Thank you very much.